Good morning, everyone. This is Michele Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. Today, my guest is someone that I've been reading about for about, I guess, 5 years now. He's a little hard to get. He's playing the challenge game, but no, actually, Jay Campbell, who's very well known. Anybody that reads the internet sees Jay. He's always omnipresent on the internet, and I don't think there's anyone that's a non-doctor that knows more about hormones and peptides and, well, particularly testosterone. So today we have a lot of deep diving to do with Jay, but I just wanted everybody to know that you're listening to someone who has spent 30 years of his life, and he's the perfect example of how crisis becomes an opportunity. And I'll explain that in just a moment, or I'll let Jay explain it. But we all have these times in our lives where we get challenged, and Jay had a huge challenge. That's a basketball player that was, I don't even want to say where he was kicked, but I think everybody figured it out.
In the old cojones.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, those of you who don't speak Spanish, you can figure that out. Anyway, so Jay had went to a doctor because he was having side effects, obviously, from this horrible accident. And that doctor turned out to be his great hero. Is a doctor in Orange County who specialized in hormones, and he introduced him to testosterone. And so why don't you go from there, Jay, and tell us what happened?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me on here today, Michele. I appreciate it. Whenever I get an opportunity to speak to people, who are very knowledgeable in the biohacking space, it's an honor, and I'm humbled and privileged to be here. So again, grateful for you to extend me the opportunity to just pick up that story. I was 30 years old at the time, and it was Dr. Raymond Scruggs. And I was recommended to him by just a PPO doctor, out of the, PPO handbook from the job that I had at the time, which was working for the Los Angeles Times. And as I know, and I know and of course your listening audience knows, there's no coincidences in the universe, only synchronicities. He turned out to be a Harvard-educated endocrinologist, and he knew how to use therapeutic testosterone. And again, this is in 1999. So this is like 23 years ago from now, when it was absolutely very few people, outside of the, what I call performance enhancement arena in Russia and Bulgaria, knew anything about using therapeutic testosterone. Obviously the bodybuilding arena and performance enhancement arena had their protocols and stuff, but nothing from a therapeutic value. That was always based on, building muscle mass and competing and using super physiologic levels. So I met with Dr. Scruggs again, and he was just recommended to me by another PPO doctor. And he told me he could put me on therapeutic testosterone. And again, I was playing an adult men's basketball league. I played in college, and I also played somewhat professionally in Austria for a short term. And I was still playing in competitive men's leagues. And, I got kicked in the testicles, and I went out. And then 6 to 8 weeks later, I was run down and broken down. And, so I went to my PPO doctor not knowing what was going on. And again, he recommended me to Dr. Scruggs. And then Dr. Scruggs, said he could put me on therapeutic testosterone. He said, but before I do, go home and speak to your fiance, who later became my wife. That was wife number one way back when. Shout outs to her, Kelly. We spoke, and she was like, look, you're a smart guy. You have a background in, molecular biology, and, you were a quote unquote OG biohacker at the time. So yeah, whatever. And so I went on it. I remember him mailing me the shots, and, it's a funny story actually, because, people look at me and they're like, you don't have any fear of injecting testosterone, where it's like 90% of the people in the world are scared shitless of needles and they won't inject themselves. But like, the true story is, the first time that I injected myself, I couldn't do it. I was sitting there holding the needle in my hand, freaked out, like, how am I going to do this? And my first wife at the time, again, Kelly, shout outs to Kelly, walked up to me and she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, and she just took it and injected my quad, and done. And I was like, and I'm just sitting there like going, oh my God, it's so easy. But the long story short, I was on his protocol, again, very low dose of testosterone cypionate for 8 weeks. And I literally, in the 8 weeks that I was on that, all the low back pain, all the issues that I was feeling from, feeling run down and broken left me. I felt reborn, revitalized, transformed. I mean, it was literally awe-inspiring to me. And when I went back to visit with him, he said, okay, well, we can take you off now and put you on HC. I just was like, whoa, bro. Like, I'm not coming off this. Like, this is life transformational. So then from that point, again, as a 30 and a half year old man, I started studying it. I intently found as much information as I could find online. This was obviously at the very beginnings of the internet in 2000. And there was not much. There were a couple of books written by Nelson Virgil and Dr. Michael Mooney, and they were writing from a perspective and viewpoint of a man suffering from AIDS and looking to survive. In fact, their book was called Built to Survive. And then later Nelson wrote Testosterone, A Man's Guide. But there was nothing. And so anyway, the only way you could learn anything at that point in time was like to be on underground, various, what were really Usenet bodybuilding forums and performance enhancement forums. And so I got deep into those, and I would, meet with quote unquote anonymous handles of people who were, veterans in that world and had been using therapeutic testosterone and of course other things for a long time. And I just became a student of that. And eventually, the truth is it became like a story of like people would meet me in my professional world and they would be very impressed with my physique. And they would ask me how I did what I did and looked the way I did. And I would always tell them, because I'm, again, a no filter, transparent, authentic guy, I would say to them, oh, well, I use a low dose of therapeutic testosterone. So then at that point, I would be met with like, oh my God, shame on you. You're using steroids. Or it would be the opposite. It would be like, the higher vibrational people would be like, fascinating, tell me more. So eventually my, higher vibration, sophisticated friends, which thankfully I had a few, were like, bro, you got to write a book on this. You know more about this than anybody on the planet. You got to share your expertise with others. And so I was like, I had a successful career at that point in time in the real estate industry with my wife. And I didn't want to do anything that I felt like could get me in trouble. So I reached out to Rick Collins, who's now a very close personal friend, and I do podcasts with him all the time, who is essentially the famous, anti-steroid attorney for Major League Baseball and professional wrestling and Hollywood and all these other things. And he didn't know me from Adam, but I basically sent him a white paper of my book, which a very abridged version, and said, look, if a lay person with a non-medical background was to write a book about this, what could happen to me? And he literally wrote me back within a day, and he read my PDF or white paper, and he was like, look, this is really awesome stuff. He goes, but I got to be honest with you, as an attorney, it just takes one senator to get a bug up their ass about you. And then you're paying me, a good amount of money to keep you from any kind of harm. So I was like, I'm not going to do it. I shelved it. But I thankfully also sent the white paper to Nelson Virgil. And there were a couple other people that I sent it to, and they never really got back to me. But Nelson responded to me 4 months later, and in the middle of the night in an email. And again, I didn't know him either. I just found his email address online, and said, look, I don't know who you are, but this is profound, and you have to write this book and you have to share it with the world. And I wrote him back immediately when I got his email, being excited and everything. I said, I'm not going to do it anymore because Rick Collins. And he immediately was like, what's your phone number? And, I wrote him back with mine, and he texted me, and then we ended up having a conversation. He goes, look, man, I love Rick, and I know Rick personally too, but Rick is just doing his job as an attorney. You got to put this information out into the ether. So that was in 2013. In 2014, I started writing the book, and he helped me. He, as I always say, stepping on the shoulders of giants, he mentored, he counseled me. The book went through various publishing delays, and eventually, finally, it was published in November of 2015. And it was, really a sensation. In the first 6 to 8 months it was on Amazon, all the doctor and allopathic world embraced it. And that original book was called The Definitive TRT Manual. And then from there, Michele, I met a lot of people. I started, going to the medical conferences and stuff like that. I was still not really as accepted as I am now because I was an outsider and obviously I didn't have a medical degree. But the people that were knowledgeable about that knew about my work and knew of the book. And they were like, this is the book that I recommend for my patients. And it's the book that I, utilize to guide my practice. And then eventually, as I met, better doctors and smarter doctors and some of the real world's leading thought leaders in the matter, coming up, all of us together just collectively collaborated on the main book, which is the definitive, not the definitive, but the Testosterone Optimization Therapy Bible, which came out in 2018, because again, it was also a publishing fiasco because I heard Mark Cuban's but whatever, bestseller publishing, to do a giant publishing ordeal. That's a whole nother story for another day, but it took them way too long to finally publish it. So it didn't come out until the end of February 2018, but obviously it became the #1 selling book of all time on the subject matter. People still refer to it. The best doctors in the world, will literally tell you that it took somebody like me to write it because doctors couldn't come together in a unified front and write all that information. And thankfully, a layperson published it, but I had obviously a lot of great information from the top docs. And so, I probably had 8 or 9 doctors that helped me write it. And it is a monster. It's 670 pages. It's got over 1,300 scientific references. But I mean, it is still to this day the document that doctors refer to when they, recommend both to their patients and to their, other people that mentor underneath them, younger coming into the marketplace doctors, first and second, third year residents to get their information on testosterone. Now, that book also has a chapter in there on women, and it's probably 65 to 70% right, because obviously the evidence has changed in the 6 years since that book was written. So it really does need to be updated. And, in truth, probably the men's stuff is only about 80 to 85% accurate now too, because again, we've discovered a lot more things in the last 6 years, but it still stands the test of time because most of the stuff that's in there is, again, based on the evidence, and the evidence was never weighed and measured in any way that anybody had ever been able to like collectively put together in one book. So, since then, to fast forward to today, I literally am working with the best doctors in the world on hormone optimization. We even do a podcast weekly on Wednesday nights. It's called the Doctors Roundtable. It's got 3 of the best doctors in the world. And sometimes I'll bring other doctors that are in that network to come on the show and stuff like that. And obviously I've written other books now on peptides. My newest book, which just came out literally 10 days ago, is guaranteed 30 Days to Shreds.
Mm-hmm.
500-page book on fat loss. It sounds like a bro manual, but it's not. It's a scientific, resource on how to lose fat in the scientifically most effective way possible in the shortest amount of time within the context of health and longevity, and, using peptides, using GLP-1 agonists and all these other medications and supplements. And so I'm honestly just blessed. I mean, I know I just spat out a lot of stuff, but, in the last 10 years of my life has just been a tremendous blessing. And I've been, grateful to just meet so many amazing people in the space similar to yourself.
European Wellness, founded by the iconic and widely published Professor Dr. Michael Chan, is the world leader in stem cell and peptide therapy, with 26 medical and aesthetic spa locations primarily in Europe and Asia. Their website, www.europeanwellness.com, details the wide range of wellness products that can be ordered using the Ageless code for a 10% discount. They will also offer our viewers discounts on medical and cosmetic services and products if they choose to visit the clinics. I have firsthand experience using their wide range of science-based stem cell and peptide products and am now a loyal customer. Go to their website, www.europeanwellness.com, for more information about this exciting company. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for all of that hard work and discipline, because writing a book just in and of itself is a huge challenge. Never mind writing 5 award all-time best-selling books, and 2 of them being on subjects, or 3 of them being on subjects that are so important to all of us. Obviously the issue for men today, and testosterone loss due to a lot of environmental factors that we can get into. But I think the most important thing to say is that there is a crisis today with men, particularly. I mean, women should have good testosterone levels too, just like men need to have estrogen levels. But you focus, as you said, 85% or thereabouts was focused on men. So let's just make the statement that there is a crisis in today's world for men losing testosterone at a rate that is alarming. And you've come along and provided answers, many answers that are, and coming from a non-medical person, that where the medical community has embraced you, that in itself is such a huge accomplishment, Jay, because the medical community very often, they look down their nose at anyone that's not. And they've accepted you, and not only accepted you, but they've embraced your theories and used you with their patients. I think that in itself is probably one of I'm just making the statement. I don't know how you feel, but if I were you, that would be one of my greatest accomplishments, being able to get through over the threshold of resistance that you're a lay person writing a book that the medical community, and I mean the experts in the medical, not just a run-of-the-mill, family doctor, but these are experts in endocrinology and hormones and so forth, and functional medicine, and they have used you as their so-called Bible. Good name for the book, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome that you say it in that way. And sometimes obviously we all suffer from imposter syndrome, but it is a very special thing that is near and dear to my heart, that I have built so many collective amazing relationships in the medical community. And you're right. I mean, the top doctors in the world absolutely support the book. I'm very, very close friends with, Dr. Mark Gordon, who's been, on the Joe Rogan podcast like 6 or 7 times and does profound, literally pro bono and volunteer work with our military, who have suffered CTEs and, all sorts of concussive, post-concussive blast disorders and all these things. And so, Dr. Rob Kumenrock, Dr. Keith Nichols, Dr. Jim Meehan, I mean, the list goes on and on, Dr. Rudy Eberwein, I mean, all the top doctors, Dr. Raymond Morgan Taylor. I mean, it's just, it's unreal like that. Yeah. That I have this illustrious panel of clinicians, to basically bounce ideas off of and rub shoulders with. And it's an amazing thing. And, I think, as my wife will say now, like when we go to the medical conferences, which, we still go to 2 of them usually a year. At one time I was going to all of them because I really obviously wanted to meet as many people as possible and get my name out there. But it's funny to see, thinking back in 2014 and 2015 when I was first doing this, to now going to these things and literally people stopping me in my tracks, coming up to me, taking pictures with me and saying, "Oh my God, you have no idea. Like without you, I wouldn't be where I'm at." So the circle has come full, and it's pretty amazing. And, and truthfully, just to be humble, like I still learn from all of them. I mean, a lot of these folks continue to message me and reach out to me and ask me questions. And oftentimes like they're questions that I really can't answer, and say, that's an amazing question. That's something that we really still have to figure out. So it has been a great honor for me to, learn from them, and now actually, be like, as you said, looked at as kind of really the leading subject matter expert on it now. And so truly it has come full circle. But again, I'm no dummy. I mean, I realize that the more I learn, the less I know. Right. So it's just, you just continue to just source the information, and realistically, you have to be willing to adapt and pivot. You can't be so stuck and hard on your awareness or your learnings that you think that you know it all. As soon as something better comes into the marketplace that's evidence-based, you have to change and have to adapt. And that's, I think, my greatest strength is that I can absolutely look right in the mirror and say, you know what, we were wrong here, and it's time to shift the boundaries. And I think if there's a problem in medicine, and I know this, it's that they don't move fast enough. They like to say that medicine has so much inertia. It's like a gigantic aircraft carrier in the Pacific attempting to go to the Atlantic. It's going to take 30 years to turn around, and then you got to factor in fuel costs and government bureaucracy and all that stuff. So thankfully, because I'm not attached to that, I can change my opinion, and I can go where the evidence shows me, and I can do it pretty quickly.
Well, let's take a deep dive. There's so many topics that we need to delve into. So tell us first, one sentence. If you were giving one sentence to summarize where we are and what we should be doing today with testosterone, what would that one sentence be?
Well, it's an amazing question. I'd have to think, but just off the top of my head, it's just, do you know your lab values? If you're a man or a woman and you're aging, and let's be honest, I mean, we are in a contaminated world, a contaminated environment. If you're in a first world country, you are under siege from plastics, from endocrine disrupting chemicals, from phthalates, from BPA, from the shit they spray in the sky, from the stuff that's in our water,
right.
from the EMFs, from the screens that we're on, from the phones that we hold. I always tell people, you don't really understand like these polymer resin plastics that are on the covers of our phones. These are military grade resin, and these things literally go right into the cuticle of our skins and contaminate our endocrine systems. So, I mean, there's really no way to avoid it. And so I always like to tell people, like, number one, you must know your levels. You must get serum blood tests done at least once, if not twice a year, especially when you're on therapeutic testosterone. But, Michele, the truth is, without like overstepping my bounds because I know we're going to get deeper into this, but the biggest tool in the tool belt now for both men and women is therapeutic testosterone. It is the one tool that will equalize all of us or all of everybody in this contaminated sea of chaos.
Right. So this is so exciting to talk about because so many people have issues with erectile dysfunction, with muscle tone, with their not libido. That I already said libido, but with their strength, just their overall strength and their disciplined attitude, and so much of it, the root cause of it is testosterone.
Yeah.
And yet most allopathic medical doctors don't even ask you when you go in to see them about your issues. They don't ask you to do anything with hormones. So we have a big gap here where we have to educate people to ask for, this is where we take responsibility for our own health. Ask for those blood tests that you're mentioning. So go to the blood test for a moment, Jay. And look, there's so many ways to get your labs, right? You can do saliva, you can do urine, you can do serum blood. I heard your one doctor on your podcast, Rudy, I think it was, saying about the liquid chromatography. So what, in your opinion, is the best and most accurate way to measure your hormones?
So it's a great question. And we literally just talked about this last night on the Doctors Roundtable podcast. So there are many ways, but all of them are flawed. The only one that is not flawed, and even when I say it's not flawed, it could be flawed depending on the person reading them and also the time of the day that you're getting measured, is the liquid chromatography, or which is called as LCMS. And that is a serum panel, which means, again, it's drawn by the blood, right? So you're having blood withdrawn from you. Salivary tests are absolutely worthless. They cannot measure free testosterone. They are also fraught with contamination from eating, insulin. I mean, there's all sorts of like salivary enzymes that can contaminate the test. In fact, the only thing that can be measured from a saliva test is cortisol, but I don't want to rabbit hole on that. But so a serum blood test, liquid spectrometry, chromatography, which is again called LCMS, is the only sure-proof way. And even when I say sure-proof, people don't realize there's various laboratory panel or company ranges. You've got LabCorp, you've got Quest, you've got Private MD Labs, Direct Labs, Discount Labs, all these different companies. Mm-hmm. And they're also measuring the gradient based on the time of the day that you're tested, right? So if a person is like using therapeutic testosterone and they take a test like after they've dosed, whether it's, transdermal or injectable, it can still show higher versus if they're at the trough of their dosage, which means they take a day off or they take what they call a holiday and they don't have an injection and then test. So right. It's difficult to like actually get a level, but for the average person listening to this, as you were saying, who's not using therapeutic testosterone, who doesn't even realize they have a testosterone deficiency. And by the way, this is my opinion, and obviously it's a very informed opinion, but I believe personally, and it's not even a belief anymore, it's a knowing, that 75% of men in Western large urban population centers, cities, states, whatever you want to call them, have a testosterone deficiency, and it's not being addressed. And for the reasons that you just said, and realistically, when they do go to a doctor, and by the way, most of them never go, they only go when their wife pushes them to go because they can't get an erection anymore. Right. These guys go to their average, just call them garden variety family doctors, PPO doctors, HMO doctors, insurance doctors. And as you said, they don't know jack smack about giving or authorizing therapeutic testosterone. Not only do they not know that, they don't even know how to read blood levels. The average physician doesn't understand the difference between total testosterone and free testosterone. They have no clue. So when these guys come into them and they say, hey, doc, my wife wants me to get my testosterone levels checked, this is the first thing they say. Oh, you don't need that. You're young, you're 35, you're 45, you're whatever. And then they say, what's your symptoms? They check for symptoms, right? And they're like, well, I have brain fog, I'm depressed, I have belly fat, and I can't get an erection. So what do they say? Oh, well, I can solve this easily. I can give you a SSRI, Wellbutrin, or whatever it is to, give you to improve your mood and get rid of your depression. And then they also write a script for PD5 inhibitor like Viagra or Levitra or Cialis, again, a blue or a pink pill. to give them an erection, to increase nitric oxide formation,
Mm-hmm.
never addressing the root cause, which is a testosterone deficiency, which causes all those other things. So sadly, it gets worse for these guys because we know SSRIs actually lower testosterone. They lower circulating free testosterone. They increase insulin resistance, leading to more inflammation, leading to more belly fat. Look, Michele, the real truth of the matter is there isn't a man in America today that has a belly. And when I say a belly, I mean like it protrudes over their belt where they can't see their penis. They can't see their penis erect or they can't see their penis flaccid. And those guys cannot get an erection because what's happening biologically in a belly like that is that there's all that visceral body fat. That visceral body fat is a highly, highly inflammatory substance. In fact, it's more inflammatory than kerosene. And so that inflammatory visceral fat is creating a massive cytokine storm in their cells at all times, preventing them from getting an erection. Now, we were talking about this on the show 2 weeks ago, and this is, again, a pet theory of mine, but Viagra, which is a very nasty drug, which obviously does increase erections and can increase nitric oxide, it's given to fat guys with bellies because it's the only thing that will overcome that cytokine resistance or that insulin resistance and those cytokine storms. But Michele, it also causes heart attacks.
Right.
So my guess is, and again, nobody's really put this out there, but I do now because I'm pretty confident in it. Like, I believe that the majority of adult males in America who die of heart attacks are dying from taking 100 milligrams of Viagra and stroking out. Now, again, they're attempting to have sex. They want to please their wives. They want to get a hard on. They can't naturally because of their belly fat, their inflammation and their insulin resistance. And so by taking this, it causes massive vascular occlusion, right? So it stimulates nitric oxide formation, but it also just lessens and can cause a heart palpitation or can cause a heart attack. Mm-hmm. So many of these dudes are just keeling over from taking 100 milligrams of Viagra.
And then what about the other objection to testosterone, which is that it'll cause you to get prostate cancer? That's the old.
That's the total inversion of the reality. The reality is, and we now know this, and again, thanks to Dr. Abraham Morgan-Taylor at Harvard and his landmark research, it's actually a testosterone deficiency that causes PCAA or prostatic cancer. It's the opposite of what people have believed for literally decades. In fact, now mainline or frontline treatment for prostatatic cancers of end stage, which is like stage 3, stage 4, stage 5, is what they call supersaturation doses of testosterone, because at high level doses of testosterone actually cause apoptosis of the prostate cancer tumors. So it's a total inversion of what people have thought. We now know that therapeutic testosterone is probably the best frontline treatment for preventing men as they age from getting prostate cancer. And look, it's very, very, it's very important that we communicate that almost all men who live beyond 80 are going to have a mild form of prostate cancer. It's just what happens to that. It's essentially a vestigial organ. We don't even know why it's there, but it's there. And as a man gets older, it increases in size. It makes a man in their 50s and 60s have to usually get up once or twice a night when they, to go to the bathroom, because again, as it increases in size, it also runs up against the urethra and it runs up against all that, called hormonal machinery down there. And so it starts pressing up against things that make you lose sensitivity or constrict the flow of urine and a lot of other things. And so it's just the way it is. But I mean, again, we now know, again, through Dr. Morgan-Taylor and a lot of the physicians that I work with and the science that's come out, we know that a healthy level of free and total testosterone as a man ages is normally enough to prevent prostatic cancer. The other thing that's important to know is that, like, when you do get prostatic cancer, it's very important to seek out multiple diagnoses from different physicians, because a lot of them literally want to put you on testosterone deprivation, which is literally worse than death itself.
Yes. And so, just for our viewers, apoptosis means cell turnover. That's a word that Jay just used when he was talking about the prostate. And the other terms I think people need to know is, what is the difference between free and total testosterone in the blood test that they're going to do?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. Again, most doctors don't know this. So total testosterone is just the measurement of the amount of testosterone flowing through a man's biological systems and vascular systems. It's not what is called free or unbound testosterone, which is the actual measured amount of testosterone that's usable to the male biological system. So basically, measuring free testosterone is the most important measurement tool, or the most important biomarker to understand, because total testosterone is not bound, or is mostly bound up in the body, and so not usable by the body. So the free testosterone measurement is the amount that's actually usable by the male. And it's important that you always measure free, because a lot of men will show a average to mid-level, or even sometimes a high level of total testosterone, and have no free testosterone. And the doctors who don't understand the difference between the two will miss that diagnosis of testosterone deficiency, because they'll see a 600, 700, 800 on the total level and say, oh, you're fine, not realizing that the free testosterone level they have is so low that they have no access to actually any testosterone in their body.
Okay, what would cause that? What if you would have a 600 total and only a suboptimal free? What would be the reason?
I mean, it's usually multi-causal, but the normal reason is A, genetics, and B, lifestyle. And again, B, lifestyle is a guy with a belly, drinks too much alcohol, consumes too much sugar, has too much visceral body fat, and insulin resistance. So not normally low free testosterone is a result of lifestyle, which again is also the result of like high inflammation. So if you're living an inflammatory lifestyle, again, you're not getting quality sleep, you consume too much alcohol, you eat too much sugar, you eat too many GMO and seed oil foods, which, oh, by the way, is the standard American diet, right, then you're likely going to have a deficiency of free testosterone. And again, all of this stuff is easily solvable by A, cleaning up your lifestyle, reducing your insulin, living what I call insulin controlled, obviously dropping body fat and ultimately inflammation. And then, of course, considering going on with a physician that can offer you a surgically precise dose of therapeutic test.
So you reference men. What about women?
Same thing. There's absolutely no difference. In fact, let's explain this. So the only difference between men and women is the amount of testosterone that the embryo was exposed to in utero. So a man has more testosterone in utero, or exposure to testosterone, than a female. So an XY chromosome for an XX chromosome. So obviously XY gets more exposure to testosterone and then develops into the male or the masculine sexual androgenic characteristics. This is why in the world of trans, all this trans stuff that's going on today, people can transition, and how they transition, if they're a female to a man, is by giving them more testosterone. Okay. And then the opposite is for the opposite of a trans, right? So going from a male to female, you have to cut off usually, and which will suppress the production of testosterone. So people are so confused by all this, but the reality is the only differentiation is that a man has more in normal times, natural testosterone production than a female does. And so just as we all age, male and females, as we lessen or cessate the production of both total and free testosterone, we lose the advantages of youth. We lose the advantages of, strong, virile, biological life forms. When we give a person, a male or female, a therapeutic dose of testosterone, we simulate a healthier biological cell. We simulate a healthier, earlier stage biological life form. So, again, there's so much transformative beneficial effects at the tissue level when we give a person who's aging therapeutic testosterone. But again, as you know, the average clinician has no clue about any of this.
So what is the optimum level for, let's say, a middle-aged man and a middle-aged woman for free testosterone? Because the total is maybe somewhat meaningless, but let's go to the one that really counts.
That's an amazing question. I mean, honestly, I could give you a lot of different answers, but the answer in my learnings in the last 25 years of this, the mentors who have really guided me in this always taught me that the two-found goal of therapeutic hormones, and this is in both men and women, is happiness and balance. Now, happiness is a transient state. Whereas joy is a permanent state of being. And obviously we can choose to be in joy or we can choose to not be in joy. But in reality, I like to change that by saying like the two-found goal of optimizing our hormones is living in a state of joy and feeling balanced, right? So it's like the levels, the numbers are really just pieces of paper or measurements on a piece of paper. They're not the all be all end all guideline or determinant, but in most men, a free testosterone level of 35 to 50 is where they're going to feel amazing. You know, we talked about this on the show last night. Like when you measure a man's free testosterone and they're somewhere between 40 and 50, the likelihood that they say, I feel great, doc, is high. Now, again, there's always reasons and outliers why it doesn't, you know, a lot of people, you know, have mental illness and other forms of issues and stuff like that that are created from fear and their psychogenic experience and stuff like that. And even a high free testosterone level keeps them in a state of like, you know, not feeling good. But for the most part, you know, by and large, an average male in a 40 to 50 range of free testosterone is going to feel amazing. You know, they don't really look at free testosterone in a woman like they do in men from a level standpoint or a gradient standpoint, but the same thing stands true for a woman. Perimenopausal, postmenopausal, and premenopausal women all usually benefit from a very low dosage of therapeutic testosterone. And again,
what's a low dosage, Jay? Sorry to interrupt. But
no, it's a great question. No, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, again, for women, it's harder for me to give you. I mean, I can give you dosage, you know, forms and stuff like that, and the minimal amounts that are usually experienced. But women are so different and so all over the board from a hormonal perspective because you have to factor in a lot of women have had hysterectomies, and when you give a woman a hysterectomy, you castrate them. That's the same thing as castrating a man. When you give a woman her hysterectomy, it's a castration. I mean, look, I just had this profound podcast yesterday with Susan Braxton, the sexologist, and she knows more about female anatomical and sexual health than probably any doctor on the freaking planet. And she's like me too. She's not a physician, but she's a genius. And she was talking about the woman's vulva and the clitoral head and how underneath that skin right there, the women have a penis. And it's absolutely the truth because and we're getting deep here, but this is, you know, relevant.
That's okay.
If you give a woman a lot of testosterone, they will absolutely develop a clitoral head that resembles a penis. And so they become like an oversized or engorged or, you know, just call it an over enlarged clitoris. And it looks like, and again, this is, you know, very well known in the bodybuilding world for women that take performance enhancing substances to, you know, become like dudes and very muscular. They have a penis. It's the clitoris becomes like a penis. And so she was talking about this in a scientific way yesterday and saying, oh yeah, well, if you open the woman up there in that vulvic chamber, that vulvic area region, you would see the anatomy of the woman's penis underneath the skin. So, I mean, again, we're going back to the idea or the reality that men and women are not different. The only differentiation biologically is the amount of testosterone that they're exposed to in utero. So now outside of the utero, and, you know, when I say in utero, we're talking about the zygote, you know, just the insemination has just happened. And now the embryo is in the woman's, you know, gestational area of pregnancy. And it's how much testosterone it's exposed to determines the sexual differentiation. But now we're outside of the womb and we're normal humans walking around and we're talking about transitioning. Again, the differentiation is how much testosterone or how little testosterone that biological being has. And so the less testosterone, the more feminine, the more testosterone, the more masculine. So it's weird, but it gets easy when you really start looking at it from a biological perspective.
You know, Jay, I want to just say, because every time, you know, an expert like you talks, of course, you think about your own self. And, you know, I've always had a very high testosterone count for a woman, but I'm also very feminine. And I know that. I mean, I have no hair, you know, I'm not, no hair on my chest, no facial hair, none of that. But I am very muscular, but I know that when we got my blood work back recently, my doctor's hormonal expert in Beverly Hills said, wow, you must have quite the clitoris. She made me blush because
That's
I
awesome.
thought about that. But that was exactly what you're talking about that Susan Braxton was saying. I had never heard that before. And frankly, I don't even notice the difference when my testosterone count is lower than higher, but that's just me. And, I'm one person. I'm sure many people are far more sensitive to their levels. So what is the best way for a woman? Let's take just a woman now, because that's
Yeah.
the 15% that you focus on. What's the best way to take testosterone? Should it always be injection, or can it be sublingual? What
No,
would you?
I mean, this is another amazing question. So the answer is whatever suits that individual person's effect model, from experience. And I literally just got into a big debate on Instagram of all places, and like 3 days ago with like some of the world's leading, let's call them strength and physique coaches that work with women, women and not bodybuilders, but like women bikini and physique competitors, because these are the women that are usually using a surgically precise dose of testosterone. Sometimes they're combining it with like, very low dose anabolics like oxandrolone, which is Anavar. And then there's other things they'll use. They'll use like DHT derivatives and stuff, very low dose. But again, this is like the leaders in the field, and so we really think at high levels that, and it's always within the context of health and longevity. We're not the typical bro idiots, giving women super high levels and then making them into guys. But the question, it's a great question, because the answer is it's difficult. You can use all of the delivery systems. So let me just break down delivery systems right now. So in men, there's two delivery systems that are preferred, and it's transdermal.
Right.
Okay. And when I say transdermal, I want to be very defined and very definitive from a standpoint of saying on the base of the scrotum is the best place for a transdermal, which is again a skin delivery system, because the base of the scrotum, which by the way, here we go, getting into women again, is the same as the clitoral head. The permutation of the skin is 8 times thinner and more transversible than any other skin area on the body. So if you put transcrotal or cream on a man's base of his scrotum, it absorbs 8 times better than anywhere else. By the way, same thing in a woman's clitoral area.
Right.
Some people will put it on the vaginal lips, but the clitoral hood is where cream is going to be best absorbed for the exact same reason as the scrotum. Now, go ahead.
Can I interrupt a second, just because this is really a burning question? What is the derivative of that cream? How is it made? What does it come from?
So it's another great question. So there's like 3 of like the top selling creams. There's Atravaceous, which is the newest one, and the one that they say is like the most efficacious because it's more stable, longer than the other two. And the other two have been around the longest. It's what I use, and it's HRT and I forgot the other one. I think it's TRT and HRT. But basically, they're made from yams, and they're made into various grades. Now, again, remember, a man is taking like a 200 milligram per milliliter solution of a compounded formulation, and a woman is using anywhere from like, I've seen like 0.5 milligrams all the way up to like 5 milligrams. Now, 5 milligrams in a cream for most women, again, there's always outliers, is too much. Like 0.5 to 2.5 is usually where I see like you get the best success rate. And again, this is just cream. Now, you asked about injections for women. It's possible to do injections for women, but the problem is that most of the formulations of injectable testosterone are not made at a small enough dosage to inject women in an area or in a way that won't overdose them. And what I mean by that is you don't normally see testosterone injectable formulations under 50 milligrams per cc. And for a woman to inject testosterone correctly, I'm serious, they shouldn't even be getting more than like 5 to 7.5 milligrams a week. That's like 7.5 milligrams is the high end. Now, for comparison and contrast sakes, for people that are not aware of this stuff. And by the way, you're asking some really amazing questions. This is a podcast I'm going to be putting on my page because I don't really get these kind of questions asked. So thank you for these great questions.
Right.
The truth is, men's injectable formulations are usually 200 milligrams per milliliter, right? So that's a massive, 15 to 20x or 20-fold increase over what an injectable formulation, a proper injectable formulation for a woman should be. So like we have to understand that like when we talk about injectable testosterone for a woman, the only way it would work is if that woman or that woman's doctor was compounding a special essentially a proprietary low milligram formulation of injectable testosterone. Now, again, cypionate, propionate, ananthate, they're different mostly from a half-life perspective in that some of them last a little bit longer than others. But what's important, Michele, to focus on, and a lot of doctors get lost on this, is that at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that testosterone is testosterone. And when it cleaves molecularly in the human bloodstream, the derivative at the end of the day is the same. So whether you get a faster acting or a slower acting or a moderate acting, or even a combination of all the three, which is what they do in Europe with Sustanon, at the end of the day, the testosterone molecule cleaves into the exact same molecule. It's not different just because it has a faster half-life or a slower half-life. So nobody, science got, and the formulators of this, they got too caught up in that 15 or 20 years ago. And now we realize that it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, once it breaks down in the bloodstream, it's the same substance.
So when it's a cream, it's from yams, just like estrogen, the three estrogens, bias, I mean. And when it's from an injectable, is it the same derivatives, or is it coming from some chemical source?
That's another good question. It can be from a different chemical source, but again, bioidentical testosterone, when it's synthesized, is the same as the testosterone that you and I have naturally in our body. Where it comes from doesn't really matter. There's multiple ways to do it. Again, they use yams. They used to use bovine testicles. There have been a lot of ways to synthesize testosterone back in the day, but nowadays the way they synthesize it is there's probably three or four different ways to synthesize it. But the good news is it's always bioidentical to what we have. The problem is, and this is something to be very focused on and emphasize in this podcast, is a lot of the manufacturers, not compounders, but the primary manufacturers, just call them the big pharma companies that manufacture injectable oil testosterone preparations, put them in GMO oils, which is horrible and highly inflammatory. Cottonseed oil, rapeseed oil. I mean, all of this garbage. Some people, as you know, who are highly allergic or sensitive to seed oils, get literally a case of anaphylaxis, or beyond that, they can get what is called, what is it? I forget what the term is when you get that. You get you get that rash or that red bump and welty area. Like, I forget what it's called, of the tissue from the injection. But anyway, the bottom line is that all of the seed oils that go into stabilizing specific testosterone preparations are absolute garbage. Never inject cottonseed oil or rapeseed oil or any of these things. So make sure that you're getting your testosterone from a compounding pharmacy that's not using GMO particulates or stabilizers.
Everybody that's watching, please, 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 if you're getting injectable, be sure to ask that question. Jay, I had never heard that before.
It's horrible. I mean, almost everything that comes out of Europe is cottonseed oil. All the old school, again, big pharma manufacturers who don't care about us, we're putting it in these cheap, seed oil stabilizers. But nowadays, the compounders that, know what's going on, they use MCT oil, which is, just palmitic cotton. I mean, not cotton oil, but it's obviously coconut oil. Yeah. They use that. They use grape seed, which people say grapeseed, and they're like, but Jay, that's another seed oil. It's really not. It's coming from a substance that's very organic. And then the other ones that you'll see now are MCT grapeseed, and I'm forgetting one right now. Oh, ethyl oleate. So another one that's a non-GMO source. So the bottom line, Michele, is that we want to get a carrier oil that's very thin. And is very easily permeable to go through small, needles, right? So this is also important over time, because we're going to be using therapeutic testosterone most likely forever, especially in these contaminated environments. We want to make sure that when we inject it, we use a very small needle barrel, because these needles can cause, essentially issues. They cause fascial adhesions where you inject it, and over time they can lead to scar tissue buildup.
Right.
So we want to make sure they're small.
Yeah, the insulin needle is the right one to ask for, and is in the abdomen the best for an injectable.
So Not really. I mean, it depends. Again, everything is depending. It's another great question because you don't even realize how great of a question it is. Because when I explain this, you're going to be like, wow, I'm glad I asked that. If you have a belly, and this is mostly for men because women don't normally store belly fat. You know, they usually have fat in their hips and the glutes and the hamstring area or the low back. But for even some women that, you know, do have a little bit of a belly, if you inject testosterone into a belly that has too much visceral body fat, guess what happens? The body sees that injectable testosterone as another inflammatory substance, and it shoots out another cytokine storm or a cytokine reaction. Remember, you already have cytokine storm because you have too much fat in the midsection. And so now you're getting all these quote unquote side effects from that injection that actually leads to what people, you know, manifest or create or what their doctors tell them are high estrogen symptoms or side effects. There's no such thing. Estrogen, and it's important that we communicate this, estrogen is what confers the protection to our biological system functioning. It's not testosterone. It's not DHT either. It's estrogen. So all these people that think when you take testosterone, you have to modulate or control or block estrogen have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. They couldn't be more wrong. Whenever we take therapeutic testosterone, we must allow the estrogen to fall to our natural genetic level or raise to the natural genetic level. Every time somebody blocks estrogen, and this is even in females, even when they block estrogen in women who have cancer, breast cancer and other forms of cancer, it only leads to harm because when you block estrogen, you block all of the protective effects of testosterone at the tissue level, brain, bone mineral density, skin. I mean, it's insane how bad it is when you block estrogen.
Right. Hey, before we have to go, I want to ask you about troches and about sublingual for testosterone, because that's how my doctor has me take 2 grams of testosterone a day. Is that a good? Is that
so my wife uses a troche / capsule now too. So getting back to your original question, because it's important, women can use oral formulations of testosterone. And the reason that is because the dosage is so low, it doesn't cause any downstream negative side effects at the liver, which would be considered hepatotoxic. Whereas with men can't use oral formulations, even though there are some out there that are, of course, FDA approved. They don't optimize men though, because the level that men get from an oral formulation is so low. It might as well be, it's almost negligible and non-noticeable and won't measure out in a test to be optimized, but it will give them, as the doctors that prescribe these will say, they'll be like, well, it'll give them something, and something is better than nothing. But again, I will argue that if you don't feel optimized from using therapeutic testosterone, then you need to increase your dose or fire your doctor.
Well, Jay, I can't even believe this, but our time is up, and I am so in awe of everything we've talked about today. I just want our viewers to realize that they have been exposed today to some of the most valuable and important information on just on one subject. We have so many other subjects to talk about.
You got to bring me back for part 2 and part 3. We got to do peptides and fat loss.
Well, that's coming. Good news is I'm on your podcast coming
up. That's right.
So I think what we should do is make this our exchange a series like you do with your doctor group.
Awesome.
Because there are so many things that we can share and help other people. And that's really the purpose of my podcast is I learned so much from you, and it's personal. But my whole purpose in starting this years ago was to help others. And of course, it's always gifts. And when you reach out to help others, the gift comes back to you.
That's right.
So anyway, yeah. So when I'm on your podcast, I'd love to launch off on any subject that you think is appropriate. But of course, in today's world, everybody's talking about peptides.
Yes, that'd be awesome.
Bioregulators. And just to give you a little bit of a note, I don't know if I mentioned to you, but I am in the clinical trials.
Yeah, you did tell me that.
Yeah, with Dr. Cavinson and
that's awesome, and Bill Lawrence. Yeah, that's amazing. No, for sure, Michele. That's what we'll do. I mean, it'll be simple. It'll be very conversational. We'll go 90 minutes if we have to, and we'll just blow up peptides and go deep down the rabbit hole and talk about peptides and bioregulators. And then the next one will come after later, whenever we set it up, will be on fat loss. Actually, we'll take what we've spent in the first two
Yeah.
shows and say, okay, now we have the ammunition. How do we design the perfect fat loss program to maintain our health and vitality as we age?
And then we have hair loss. So I mean, I thought we could cover all of that today, and here we did such a deep dive into TRT that I know that we've paid some people an amazing gift of information that if they didn't know before, they should be rushing to make that appointment with the right doctor, right?
Exactly.
And getting their testosterone levels. But that's just one of many hormones to balance. But it is one of the most, well, you know that it's the king of the mountain for a man.
That's right, for sure.
All right. I'm going to say goodbye to you, and I wish you a beautiful day. And thank you again for being so helpful to everyone and sharing your knowledge today. And I will see you on October 5th.
You will. And let me just say for everybody, I know you're going to put this in the show notes, but for everybody who's watched this today, if you want access to any of my books, I do give them away for free, except for the last two, which have just come out this year, which we're going to be talking about in the next two versions, which is the peptides book. And of course, the newest one, which is 30 Days to Shreds, but it's jcampbell.com/free books. And you can go there and download any of those PDFs or all my books now, which are 7. So thank you so much for being on the show or letting me be on your show today, Michele. It's been amazing.